Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of the most fascinating Greek myths, a tale of trickery, loss, and the endless dance between life and death. You probably won't survive the underworld if you don't have the stomach for a pomegranate, but don't worry, you'll make it through this myth just fine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment about where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fun to hear from listeners all over the world, relaxing with me under the spell of Greek mythology. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins, as most Greek myths do, with gods and goddesses roaming the earth, wielding power over nature. Persephone, the beautiful daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, was spending her days in the lush fields of the earth, picking flowers and enjoying the warmth of spring. Her laughter echoed across the meadows, and the earth itself seemed to bloom with life in her presence. But as it so often goes with the gods, not everyone was happy with Persephone's joy. Hades, the god of the underworld, watched from his dark kingdom below, his heart cold and calculating. He had seen the lovely Persephone from afar and desired her for himself, for he had long been lonely in his shadowy realm. Hades was no fool. He knew that Demeter would never willingly give up her daughter, so he devised a plan. On a bright, beautiful day, as Persephone was strolling through the fields, gathering flowers, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. Before she could react, a chasm opened in the earth, and from it emerged Hades, riding his black chariot, his eyes burning with desire. In an instant, he seized Persephone, pulling her into his chariot and descending into the underworld, leaving the earth above empty and still. Now imagine yourself standing in the meadow, witnessing the impossible. One moment, the sun is shining, the flowers are blooming, and then, just like that, the sky darkens and Persephone is gone, taken by the very forces of nature that her mother commands. Historians still debate whether Hades' actions were an outright kidnapping or a more romantic, albeit tragic, act of love. Some believe he had no intention of harm, but simply desired Persephone to join him in his shadowy realm, while others argue that he was ruthless in his pursuit of her. Whatever the case, one thing was clear. This act would set the stage for an eternal struggle that would not only change the fate of Persephone, but also the very rhythm of the seasons. Now that Persephone is trapped in the underworld, let's turn our attention to her mother, Demeter, who is left behind in a frantic search. Imagine the desperation she must have felt. One moment her daughter was with her, basking in the warmth of the sun, and the next, she was gone, taken by a force beyond her control. Demeter searched far and wide, her grief spilling over into the earth itself. The harvests began to wither, the crops ceased to grow, and the once bountiful fields fell silent. In her sorrow, Demeter withdrew from her duties as the goddess of agriculture. Without her nurturing touch, the earth began to suffer, and so did the mortals who depended on it. The earth grew barren, and winter began to set in. The once rich fields of grain, which had flourished under Demeter's care, became nothing more than empty land. No crops grew. No flowers bloomed. The gods themselves began to notice the devastation. Without Demeter's influence, life on earth was becoming harder and harder to sustain. Yet, despite her power to revive the earth, Demeter's sorrow kept her from action. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Persephone was adjusting to her new life, though not by choice. Hades, though often perceived as cold and merciless, showered her with riches and fine food, seeking to make her his queen. He provided her with everything she could need, but none of it could fill the emptiness in her heart. Persephone longed for her mother, for the warmth of the sun, and for the life she once had above. Now picture Persephone sitting in the darkened underworld, her sadness palpable in the cold stone around her. She sits on a throne beside Hades, surrounded by riches, but none of it could distract her from the gnawing loneliness and longing she felt for the life she left behind. Yet, as time passed, she began to accept her new role, and in doing so, a strange bond began to form between her and the underworld. She was, after all, becoming its queen. Historians still argue about Persephone's true feelings toward her time in the underworld. Was she really taken against her will, or did she come to accept and even grow into her power? Some suggest that over time, Persephone gained strength in her new role, while others believe she was forever the tragic victim of Hades' desire. But one thing is for sure, Demeter's loss was Persephone's gain, as she began to rule the underworld with her new husband, Hades. But Demeter's sorrow, though it waged on, could not go unanswered forever. The gods, moved by the suffering of the earth and the people, knew they had to intervene. At last, after searching the world above for what felt like an eternity, Demeter's grief was brought to the attention of the gods on Mount Olympus. Zeus, the king of the gods, had witnessed the devastation Demeter's sorrow had wrought on the earth, and he knew something had to be done. The crops had failed, the seasons had shifted unnaturally, and humanity was suffering. But it was not just for the mortal world that Zeus had to act. He too recognized the pull of the deep bond between Demeter and Persephone, a bond that had the power to heal not only their rift but the earth itself. So Zeus called upon Hermes, the messenger god, to descend into the underworld and retrieve Persephone. Hermes, always quick-witted and fleet of foot, was given the task of bringing Persephone back to her mother. Imagine the solemnity of the task as Hermes descended into the dark, cold depths of the underworld. There, he found Persephone sitting beside Hades on her throne, her face as beautiful and serene as it was full of sadness, a queen of a realm she never chose. When Hermes approached Persephone, he delivered the message of hope. The gods had decreed she would return to her mother and to the earth she once knew. But there was a catch. Hades, ever clever and unwilling to let go of his queen, had already set a plan in motion. Before Persephone could leave, Hades offered her a final parting gift, a pomegranate, a fruit of the underworld. Historians have long debated the significance of the pomegranate in this myth. Some suggest that the pomegranate represents the binding of Persephone to the underworld, as each seed she ate would tie her to the realm of the dead. Others argue that it was a symbol of the balance Persephone had to maintain between the world of the living and the dead. Whatever the case, when Persephone ate the seeds, she unknowingly sealed her fate. It wasn't just an innocent bite, it was a contract between the realms of life and death. After consuming the seeds, Persephone was forced to return to the underworld for part of the year, while spending the rest of her time with Demeter on the earth. Persephone, now caught between two worlds, would come to symbolize the cycles of life and death, the eternal balance between the light and dark of the seasons. As you picture Persephone holding the pomegranate in her hands, its seeds bright against the dark backdrop of the underworld, you can almost feel the weight of the decision. The pomegranate, once a symbol of innocence and sweetness, now becomes a marker of her dual existence, neither fully of the earth, nor completely of the underworld. She had unknowingly made her choice, and in doing so, she became the living embodiment of the seasons, forever bound to both the world of life and the world of death. Historians still argue whether Persephone ate the pomegranate out of curiosity, defiance, or a deeper understanding of her role in the cosmic cycle. Some even suggest that she ate it willingly, knowing her destiny, while others believe it was an act of resistance against Hades. Regardless, the act of eating the pomegranate marked a turning point, one that would shape the rest of her existence and influence the rhythm of life and death. As Persephone's fate became sealed with the pomegranate seeds, the winds of change began to blow across both the underworld and the world above. Persephone's return to Demeter was joyous, but it was tempered by the understanding that she would have to leave again. With each passing year, Persephone would spend part of her time with her mother, in the fertile and sunlit world, and the rest in the shadowy underworld, ruling alongside Hades. This cycle of departure and return would forever mark the changing seasons, and from that moment forward, the land would flourish in her presence and wither in her absence. For Demeter, the return of her daughter brought immense relief. The earth began to bloom once again, as the harvests grew bountiful and the crops flourished. It was a time of renewal, of fertility, of life bursting forth from the soil. Yet, as the seasons shifted, Demeter knew that her daughter's departure was inevitable. As Persephone descended into the underworld, the earth would fall into winter, a cold, barren state that mirrored the separation between mother and daughter. Each cycle, a constant reminder of the bond between them, and the deep connection that defined both the physical and emotional worlds. Picture Demeter, standing in a field, her arms raised to the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun return as Persephone steps onto the earth once more. The land responds to their reunion, as if the very ground itself is exhaling a long-held breath. The earth hums with life, vibrant and lush once again. It is the earth's heartbeat, syncing with the rhythm of the seasons, with the rhythm of the goddess and her daughter. Yet, as Persephone prepares to leave again, the earth begins to quiet. The crops slow their growth, and the fields lie dormant, a reflection of Demeter's sorrow. In the underworld, Persephone's dual role begins to unfold. As the queen of the underworld, she gained power and respect, reigning beside Hades, her presence transforming the realm of death into one of justice and balance. Persephone wasn't just a passive figure in the shadows. She played an active role in the underworld, deciding the fates of souls and guiding the spirits of the dead. While her time in the underworld was filled with solemn duties, it also gave her a unique understanding of life and death, a knowledge that would shape her every decision. The relationship between Persephone and Hades, while initially one of capture and constraint, evolved into something much deeper. Hades, though often portrayed as a cold and unfeeling god, grew to value Persephone's wisdom and power. The two shared an understanding, an unspoken bond that transcended the underworld's darkness. Their relationship, complex and sometimes fraught, was based on respect, power, and an eventual recognition that their union was not just one of necessity, but of balance. Historians still debate the nature of Persephone and Hades' relationship. Some view it as one of coercion and captivity. Others suggest that it was a marriage of equals, with Persephone growing into her role as queen. Still, others believe that Persephone's time in the underworld allowed her to embrace the darkness as a part of her, making her a goddess who could rule both life and death, the living and the dead. Regardless of interpretation, Persephone's position as both a goddess of the earth and of the underworld places her at the crossroads of all things mortal and immortal. This dual existence of Persephone symbolizes the inevitable balance between life and death, light and darkness, growth and decay. As the windmill turns with the wind, the cycles of Persephone's journey between two worlds mirror the ever-changing rhythms of the earth, the passage of time, and the eternal flow of the seasons. Every year, her descent and return mark the delicate balance that sustains the world around us. Now that we've examined Persephone's role in the underworld and her symbolic link to the cycles of the seasons, let's delve deeper into the broader spiritual and philosophical significance of her myth. At its core, the story of Persephone speaks to the inescapable nature of life and death, the delicate balance between creation and destruction, and the recurring cycles of transformation that shape both nature and human existence. Her journey between the underworld and the Earth's surface isn't just a tale of seasonal change. It's a metaphor for the transformation that each of us undergoes in life. Imagine for a moment that you, too, are Persephone caught between two worlds. Every year, you are pulled back into the depths of the earth, into the darkness of the underworld, only to emerge again reborn when the time is right. The underworld, in many ancient myths, represents the realm of death, but it's also a place of profound reflection and renewal. In this space, there is no life without death, no resurrection without decay. Persephone's time in the underworld reflects this cyclical nature. The death of winter gives birth to the spring, just as her time below the earth nurtures the fertility of the world above. Her journey symbolizes the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a powerful reminder that no part of existence is permanent, and that each phase is necessary for the next. In a deeper sense, Persephone's myth represents the profound shift that happens when we confront our own inner darkness. By spending part of each year in the underworld, Persephone is able to understand both life and death intimately. Her dual existence grants her a unique perspective, one that neither the gods of the heavens nor the mortals of the earth possess. She is both the queen of the living and the queen of the dead, straddling two realms with wisdom that transcends the boundaries between them. It's in the darkness of the underworld that she discovers her true power, and it's in her return to the surface that she manifests that power for the benefit of the earth. This duality in Persephone's character also reflects the complexities of the human experience. We too live between worlds, the conscious and the unconscious, the physical and the spiritual. We spend part of our lives in the light, interacting with the world, creating and growing. But we also must confront the darkness within ourselves, the shadowy parts of our psyche, the pain, and the grief that we must face if we are to grow. Persephone's myth reminds us that this journey through darkness is not something to be feared, but something essential for personal transformation. Just as Persephone must descend into the underworld to find her strength, we too must embrace our shadow selves in order to become whole. Historians and scholars continue to explore the themes of death and rebirth in Persephone's myth. Some argue that it reflects the ancient Greek understanding of the natural world and its seasons, while others suggest that it has a deeper connection to the human experience of growth and transformation. Some even see Persephone's myth as an early depiction of the soul's journey, a representation of the passage from life to death, and the eventual return to life. Whatever interpretation you choose, one thing is certain: Persephone's journey offers timeless wisdom about the need for balance and the transformative power of embracing both life and death. Through Persephone's myth, the ancient Greeks explored the notion that life and death are intertwined, that each feeds into the other, and that we cannot experience one without the other. It's a view of existence that has persisted throughout history and remains deeply relevant today. Her story encourages us to not only accept the cyclical nature of life, but to find power in those cycles, to see death not as an end, but as a transition, a necessary part of the journey toward new beginnings. Now that we've explored the deeper spiritual and philosophical layers of Persephone's myth, let's take a moment to consider how this ancient story still resonates in modern times. While we might not encounter gods or goddesses on a daily basis, the themes of Persephone's journey, life, death, and rebirth, are as relevant today as they were in ancient Greece. From personal growth to societal transformation, we constantly experience cycles that mirror Persephone's seasonal descent into the underworld and return to the earth. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. We all go through periods of darkness, times when we feel isolated or overwhelmed, as though we've been pulled into the underworld. It could be the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or a personal crisis that forces us to face our inner fears. But just as Persephone's time in the underworld is not permanent, neither are these dark periods in our lives. Each time we move through a challenging experience, we emerge from it transformed, much like Persephone rising from the underworld to bring fertility and renewal to the earth. This is where the beauty of Persephone's myth shines through. It reminds us that, much like the seasons, all things, both good and bad, are temporary. The dark winters of our lives give way to the spring of new beginnings. Persephone's return to the earth signifies the hope and renewal that follow times of hardship. It is in her return that she embodies the very essence of transformation, showing us that no matter how long the winter may seem, spring is always just around the corner. For those of us facing personal trials, the myth of Persephone offers comfort. It teaches us that suffering and grief, while difficult, are not eternal. We may have to endure our own winter of the soul, but just as Persephone's time in the underworld was necessary for the earth's renewal, our own periods of darkness can lead to personal growth, deeper understanding, and an eventual renewal of spirit. On a societal level, Persephone's myth also speaks to the cycles of civilizations and cultures. Much like how the changing seasons affect nature, civilizations rise and fall, go through periods of peace and turmoil, and ultimately transform. Think of how many times history has seen the collapse of empires or the end of a way of life, only to give birth to something new, something revitalized. Persephone's return to the earth can be seen as the revival of hope after destruction, the emergence of new ideas after a time of crisis. For instance, consider how societies rebuild after war or disaster. Just as Persephone's return marks the blossoming of the earth after her descent, human civilizations, too, rebuild after loss and destruction. Through perseverance and the cycle of life and death, people find the strength to rise again, to innovate, and to create something that continues to honor the past while embracing the future. Persephone's myth, in this sense, becomes a metaphor for cultural and personal resilience. Historians often debate whether myths like Persephone's were primarily meant to explain the natural world, or whether they had deeper symbolic meanings. Some argue that the myth is simply an explanation for the changing seasons, while others believe it was a spiritual allegory for the human experience of death and rebirth. Either way, it is clear that Persephone's journey continues to serve as a powerful metaphor for transformation. Whether we're talking about personal growth, societal change, or the eternal cycles of nature. The notion of duality, represented by Persephone's role in both the underworld and the earth, also speaks to the complexity of the human experience. Life and death are inextricably linked, as are the cycles of light and dark, joy and sorrow. Persephone, as the queen of both realms, reflects this duality, symbolizing the necessity of balance. Without death, there could be no life. Without sorrow, there could be no joy. Persephone teaches us that we must accept both sides of existence in order to fully understand the world and our place within it. As we reflect on Persephone's duality and the balance between life and death, let's take a closer look at how her myth influenced the rituals and beliefs of ancient Greek society. The ancient Greeks, like many ancient cultures, had a deeply spiritual understanding of the cycles of life and nature. Their religious practices were heavily intertwined with the mythological stories they told, and Persephone's story, in particular, became central to many of their rituals surrounding fertility, agriculture, and the afterlife. The myth wasn't just a tale passed down for entertainment. It was a guide, a way to understand the world, to mark the passage of time, and to cope with the uncertainties of life. One of the most prominent rituals associated with Persephone was the Eleusinian Mysteries, a secretive and sacred set of rites that honored both Demeter and Persephone. These mysteries were held annually in the town of Eleusis, just outside Athens, and were among the most important religious ceremonies in ancient Greece. They were dedicated to the worship of Demeter and Persephone, and they symbolized the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The initiation rites were shrouded in secrecy, but it is believed that they included symbolic representations of Persephone's descent into the underworld and her eventual return. The mysteries gave participants a sense of hope and renewal, promising them that, just like Persephone, they would one day return to the light after death. Imagine yourself as one of the initiates of these mysteries, standing in the darkness of the initiation hall, waiting for the moment when the light of understanding will reveal itself. You might have been a farmer, a merchant, or even a noble, but in the mysteries, everyone was equal. They all sought the same knowledge, the same reassurance that life would continue in some form after death. Persephone's journey, in this context, was not just a story, it was a promise of life after death, an assurance that even in the darkest of places, there was hope for rebirth and transformation. This connection to the afterlife would have provided immense comfort to the ancient Greeks, who often lived with the uncertainty of what would happen when they passed on. While the specifics of the rituals remain secret, historians still debate their meaning and purpose. Some believe the Eleusinian Mysteries were about fertility and the agricultural cycles, while others argue they held a deeper, more philosophical message about life, death, and the soul's journey. Regardless of the interpretation, the central role of Persephone in these rites speaks to her symbolic importance as a goddess who bridged the worlds of life and death, showing the ancient Greeks that death was not an end, but a transformation. Beyond the Eleusinian Mysteries, Persephone's influence can be seen in the way the ancient Greeks viewed the changing seasons. Her myth was a direct explanation for the cycles of nature. The ancient Greeks understood that the earth itself seemed to die in the winter and come to life in the spring. Persephone's descent and return were symbolic of the earth's seasonal cycles. As she descended into the underworld, the earth grew barren, reflecting the withering of plants during winter. But when she returned to the earth, flowers bloomed and crops grew, symbolizing the renewal of life in spring. This seasonal transformation was an essential part of ancient Greek life. The changing of the seasons dictated when they would plant crops, harvest, and celebrate festivals. The myth of Persephone and her cycles of life and death provided a framework for understanding the rhythms of nature. It helped the ancient Greeks make sense of the world around them, turning the harshness of winter into something understandable and even hopeful, just as Persephone's return to the earth promised renewal after the cold, dark months. Historians often argue about the exact role of myth in ancient Greek society. Some view it as a purely religious or cultural phenomenon, while others see it as a way to explain the natural world. In the case of Persephone, her story represents both. It is deeply tied to the cycles of nature and agriculture, yet it also holds a profound spiritual and philosophical significance. The Greeks didn't just tell this myth to explain the seasons. They used it to understand life, death, and the nature of the human soul. In this sense, Persephone's myth is timeless, still resonating with us today in the way we think about nature, transformation, and the eternal cycles of life. As we continue to unravel the layers of Persephone's myth, let's explore her dual role as both a goddess of fertility and a queen of the underworld. This unique position in Greek mythology highlights the balance between life and death, creation and destruction. While many deities had dominion over one realm or the other, Persephone's ability to move seamlessly between the worlds of the living and the dead made her one of the most powerful and enigmatic figures in the pantheon. Her story is not simply about the changing of the seasons, it's about the eternal equilibrium between opposing forces that define existence itself. Imagine the contrast: Persephone, the bright, youthful goddess of spring, who embodies life, joy, and growth, and Persephone, the solemn queen of the underworld, ruler of the dead and keeper of secrets. It's a duality that speaks to the complexity of human experience. We all have parts of ourselves that we embrace and parts that we fear or hide, much like Persephone's journey between these two extremes. By embracing both her roles, goddess of life and queen of death, Persephone teaches us that these opposites are not only necessary but complementary. In her role as the goddess of spring and rebirth, Persephone was the protector of the crops, the harvest, and the fertility of the land. The fields would bloom when she returned to the earth, as if her very presence breathed life into the plants. Her power was intimately tied to the seasons, and the changing of the earth's cycles mirrored her own journey between the underworld and the surface world. In this sense, Persephone was seen as the guardian of growth and renewal, symbolizing the eternal process of life springing forth from death. But when Persephone descended to the underworld, she became a figure of justice and control. In the dark, shadowy realm of the dead, she shared the throne with Hades, overseeing the souls of the departed. It was here that her transformation into a powerful queen took place. Persephone was no longer the innocent maiden she had once been. She had become a ruler in her own right, with the authority to judge the souls that entered her domain. This aspect of Persephone shows that even in the darkest places, there is power to be wielded, and she was not merely a passive figure in the underworld, but an active force of balance, governing the passage of souls. Historians still debate whether Persephone's duality represents a more profound philosophical concept, or if it was merely a reflection of the ancient Greeks' understanding of the cyclical nature of existence. Some argue that Persephone's role as both a goddess of life and a queen of the dead reflects the Greeks' complex view of life and death, how one cannot exist without the other, and how life's vitality is inseparable from its eventual decay. Others see her myth as a symbolic representation of the human condition itself, illustrating how we must all experience both light and darkness to fully understand the nature of existence. Regardless of interpretation, Persephone's duality became a central theme in her worship. Her role as a goddess who could both bring life and rule over death made her an ideal figure for those seeking comfort in times of loss or hardship. The Eleusinian mysteries, which celebrated her return and descent, emphasized this theme of death and rebirth, offering the initiates hope that, like Persephone, they too could experience renewal after facing their own challenges. The myth served not only as a religious explanation for the seasons, but as a guide for navigating life's trials and triumphs. When we look at Persephone through the lens of duality, we see more than just a goddess who divides her time between two realms. She embodies the very cycles of existence: birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. She teaches us that all parts of life, even the darker, more difficult ones, are interconnected, and that from death comes new life, just as spring follows winter. Her story is one of balance, showing us that neither life nor death can exist without the other, and that it is in the merging of these opposing forces that true understanding and growth take place. As we delve deeper into Persephone's myth and her dual existence, we can't overlook the symbolic implications of her role in both the realms of the living and the dead. Persephone's story is rich with metaphors about the cycles of nature, but also about the cycles of the human experience. Her journey represents not just the changing of seasons, but the journey each of us takes through life, from innocence to experience, from light to darkness, and from life to death. In many ways, Persephone is the perfect symbol of this process of transformation and growth. At the heart of her story is the question of power and control. Persephone's abduction by Hades may initially seem like a story of loss or victimhood, but as we explore her time in the underworld, we see how she evolves into a powerful figure in her own right. Persephone's reign in the underworld is marked by her control over life and death, and it's through her journey between these realms that she gains her strength. She is both passive and active, a symbol of the tensions between surrender and empowerment, between being taken and choosing to rule. This duality is not just a reflection of Persephone herself, but a larger reflection of the ancient Greek worldview. The Greeks were keenly aware of the tensions between opposites, life and death, joy and sorrow, freedom and fate, and they saw these forces as interconnected rather than separate. Persephone's myth captures this perfectly, showing that the dark and light parts of existence cannot be avoided. They must be embraced in order for true understanding to take place. In her role as the goddess of life and rebirth, Persephone represents the transformative power of renewal. The spring that follows winter is not just a return to life, it's a chance to start anew, to grow, and to evolve. In the same way, Persephone's return from the underworld signifies not just a physical rebirth, but a psychological one as well. Each year, when she returns to the earth, it is a reminder that after hardship and death, there is always the potential for new growth, for change, and for renewal. Consider the connection between this idea of renewal and the natural world. The seasons change, and with each change, life transforms. Persephone's myth captures the essence of these cycles, showing that life is not static. Just as the earth transforms with the seasons, so do we. We grow, we struggle, we face our own winters of hardship, but we also emerge from them, transformed and renewed. Persephone's return is a reminder that change is inevitable, and that from the darkest places come the brightest moments of growth. This idea of renewal also plays a role in the cultural and religious practices surrounding Persephone. In ancient Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries were held in her honor, marking the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The mysteries were more than just a religious ceremony. They were a way for the people of Athens to reconnect with the earth and with the divine. Through these rituals, the participants symbolically followed Persephone's journey, experiencing their own spiritual death and rebirth. These rites were meant to offer hope, showing that no matter the hardship, there is always the potential for spiritual renewal. Historians have long debated the nature of the Eleusinian mysteries, with some arguing that they were deeply connected to Persephone's myth, and others suggesting they were more concerned with the agricultural cycles. But what's clear is that the myth of Persephone gave meaning to the cycles of life and death, offering comfort to those who needed it. By embracing both aspects of life, the light and the dark, Persephone became a symbol of balance and resilience, teaching people that in every ending, there is a new beginning. As we reflect on Persephone's story, we see how her myth resonates with us today. The themes of life, death, and rebirth continue to shape our understanding of the world. Just like Persephone, we face our own struggles, our own winters of the soul, but we also have the potential to emerge from them stronger, wiser, and renewed. Persephone's journey through the underworld and her return to the earth is a timeless reminder of the cyclical nature of life and the power we all have to transform and grow. As we continue to explore Persephone's myth and its deep spiritual themes, it's important to consider the lasting impact of her story on later cultures and how it influenced other myths and beliefs across time. Persephone's dual nature, goddess of life and queen of the underworld, became an archetype for later myths of descent and return, offering a template for understanding the transformative journey of the soul. Her myth also connects to themes of the human condition that continue to resonate today: the cyclical nature of existence, the balance between light and dark, and the capacity for renewal after loss. Persephone's influence is evident not only in other Greek myths, but also in the stories of many other cultures that emerged later. Her journey between two realms, the world of the living and the realm of the dead, can be seen as a precursor to other mythological figures who travel between the physical and spiritual worlds. For example, the concept of a hero's journey through death and resurrection appears in countless myths, from the descent of the hero in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the Christian story of Christ's death and resurrection. The figure of Persephone, with her unique ability to inhabit both life and death, continues to provide a universal symbol for transformation and rebirth in these stories. One interesting comparison is the figure of Inanna from Sumerian mythology, who descends into the underworld to visit her sister, only to be stripped of her powers and forced to confront death. Inanna's story mirrors Persephone's, both in its themes of descent and the eventual return to life. While Inanna's journey focuses more on her confrontation with the forces of death, Persephone's return is marked by a season of growth and renewal, highlighting the connection between death and life itself. Both stories embody the idea that there is no true rebirth without first experiencing some form of death or loss. This archetype of descent and return also extends to more modern interpretations of the human experience. Think of the concept of metaphysical death, the idea that one must face and understand death in order to fully live. Many spiritual traditions emphasize the need for individuals to confront their fears, losses, or even aspects of their own personality that they may wish to suppress, much like Persephone's descent into the underworld. This journey through the darkness, the facing of the unknown, and the eventual emergence into light is a metaphor for personal growth, psychological healing, and the acceptance of life's impermanence. The cycles of life and death depicted in Persephone's myth also carry great resonance in modern environmental thought. The myth itself is a reflection of the natural world's seasonal rhythms, and today, it serves as a reminder of the interconnectedness of life and death in nature. Just as Persephone's return to the earth brings fertility and new growth, the earth itself renews itself through cycles of life, decay, and rebirth. This understanding is especially relevant in our contemporary world, where environmental sustainability and the recognition of nature's cycles are becoming increasingly important. Persephone's influence on environmental thought doesn't stop at her role as the goddess of spring and rebirth. The Earth's seasonal changes, as symbolized by Persephone's movements, remind us of the fragility and beauty of life. Her myth offers a sense of balance between human activities and the natural world, encouraging us to think about the rhythms of nature and how we can live in harmony with the earth. The changing of the seasons is not something we control. It is something that happens beyond our influence, and yet it sustains us. Much like Persephone's story, the Earth's ability to heal and regenerate is an enduring symbol of hope and renewal, even in the face of hardship. Historians and environmental scholars continue to debate how ancient myths like Persephone's have influenced modern views of nature and humanity's relationship to the Earth. Some argue that these ancient stories provided early metaphors for understanding the cycles of nature, while others suggest that they were simply religious or cultural tools used to explain natural phenomena. Regardless of their exact origins, it is clear that Persephone's myth remains a powerful symbol of the interconnectedness of life and death, a reminder that from every ending comes the promise of new beginnings. As we reflect on Persephone's enduring influence, we realize that her story is more than just an ancient myth. It's a timeless metaphor for the human condition, for the cycles we experience both individually and collectively. Her journey from darkness to light and back again mirrors the ebbs and flows of our own lives, from birth to death, from loss to renewal. Persephone teaches us that even in our darkest moments, there is always the potential for growth, transformation, and eventual return to the light. Now that we've explored the profound and multifaceted legacy of Persephone's myth, let's examine how this ancient story has continued to evolve and inspire through the ages. While Persephone's journey was rooted in the specific cultural context of ancient Greece, her myth has transcended time and geography, leaving an indelible mark on the arts, literature, and even modern psychology. Her dual existence, goddess of life and death, queen of both the underworld and the earth, continues to captivate those who explore the depths of mythology and human experience. In literature, Persephone's story has been reimagined and retold in countless ways, from ancient tragedies to modern novels and plays. Her journey, which involves descent and return, is a universal story that resonates with the human psyche. Writers have long been drawn to Persephone's tale because it encapsulates themes of transformation, self-discovery, and the intricate dance between opposing forces. For instance, the famous playwright Euripides explored Persephone's myth in his works, often focusing on the emotional weight of her descent and the relationships between gods and mortals. In modern literature, Persephone's myth has often been used as a metaphor for personal growth and the journey through life's trials. One of the most well-known modern retellings is in the work of contemporary authors who draw on Persephone's story to depict the female experience of transformation, empowerment, and reclaiming one's voice. In these reimaginings, Persephone's descent into the underworld is not just about her capture or loss, but about her empowerment and agency, reflecting contemporary themes of self-empowerment and resilience. In the realm of modern psychology, Persephone's myth has found its way into discussions about the human psyche, especially in the context of Jungian analysis. Carl Jung, a prominent psychologist, believed in the importance of archetypes, universal symbols or patterns that are embedded in the collective unconscious. Persephone, as the goddess who exists between two realms, serves as a powerful archetype of duality and transformation. She represents the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, which is a constant in human psychology, particularly when it comes to personal growth. Jungian analysts have used Persephone's myth to explore how individuals go through their own underworld experiences, periods of darkness or hardship, and emerge transformed, just as Persephone does each year. Moreover, Persephone has been adopted as a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. The very idea of her enduring both the light and dark aspects of existence, ruling in both the underworld and the world above, makes her a powerful symbol for anyone navigating the complexities of life. This duality represents the internal balance between one's shadow self and conscious self, between the parts of us that are hidden and those that are illuminated. Persephone's myth encourages us to embrace all parts of ourselves, including the ones we might consider dark or difficult, for they are just as vital to our growth as the more positive aspects of life. The impact of Persephone's story extends far beyond the pages of myth. Her influence can be seen in visual arts, from Renaissance paintings to contemporary illustrations. In these works, Persephone is often depicted as both a vibrant young goddess and a somber queen, reflecting her complex nature. Artists have explored her duality in different ways, some emphasizing her innocence and beauty in spring, while others focus on her strength and sovereignty in the underworld. These depictions reflect the many layers of Persephone's character and the duality that is central to her myth. Persephone's visual representations often carry rich symbolism. Artists have used the motif of the pomegranate, one of Persephone's defining symbols, to evoke themes of life, death, and the binding power of the underworld. The bright red seeds, nestled within the fruit, represent both fertility and entrapment, a striking contrast that underscores Persephone's position as the queen of both life and death. This powerful symbol has appeared in countless works of art, from classical sculptures to modern digital art, illustrating how the myth of Persephone continues to inspire creative interpretations. In pop culture, Persephone's myth has been adapted in various forms, from films and television series to graphic novels and video games. Her role as both a goddess of the underworld and a figure of empowerment has made her a popular character in many retellings of ancient myths. In these adaptations, Persephone is often portrayed as a strong, independent woman who must reconcile her dual roles as the daughter of Demeter and the wife of Hades. This reimagining highlights her inner conflict, making her a relatable figure for modern audiences navigating their own complex identities and relationships. Historians and scholars continue to explore the deeper meanings behind Persephone's myth, and while the core elements of her story remain unchanged, the interpretations continue to evolve. Some argue that her myth is a reflection of ancient Greek religious practices, while others believe it speaks to universal themes of transformation, power, and the cycles of nature. The ongoing reinterpretations of Persephone's story show just how timeless and adaptable her myth truly is. Her legacy, however, is not confined to just literature, art, or culture. Persephone's myth reminds us that there is strength in embracing both light and dark, that from every end comes a new beginning. It's a message that continues to resonate today, encouraging us to confront the difficulties in life, accept our shadow selves, and emerge stronger and more resilient. Just like Persephone, the queen of both the living and the dead. Now that we've traced Persephone's legacy through the centuries, let's explore how the myth of Persephone has been used as a symbol of seasonal and agricultural cycles, not just in ancient Greece, but across cultures and in the modern world. The myth of Persephone is often seen as a way of explaining the seasons, how the earth goes through cycles of growth and decay, light and dark. But the deeper themes of Persephone's myth, her journey between worlds, her power over life and death, also mirror the cycles of personal transformation that we experience in our own lives. In ancient Greece, the myth of Persephone explained why the earth's crops grew and withered. When Persephone was with her mother, Demeter, the earth flourished with crops, flowers bloomed, and harvests were abundant. But when Persephone descended to the underworld, Demeter's sorrow caused the earth to become barren, symbolizing the winter months. The changing seasons were seen as a reflection of Persephone's journey, her descent into the underworld during the colder months, and her return to the earth bringing new life in the spring. In a way, Persephone's cycle mirrors the natural cycle of life and death that every living being goes through. As she enters the underworld, there is an inevitable decay, followed by her return to the world above, where new life bursts forth from the earth. This cycle of death and rebirth, of the earth lying fallow and then being rejuvenated, became a central part of agricultural and spiritual life in ancient Greece. Farmers understood that the seasons were a natural process, one that they could not control but could work with. And Persephone, as both the goddess of the harvest and the queen of the underworld, was seen as the embodiment of this cyclical process. Interestingly, this agricultural cycle can also be found in many other cultures. The myth of Persephone has similarities to myths from other ancient civilizations, particularly those with strong agricultural traditions. For example, in ancient Egypt, the god Osiris was also associated with death and rebirth. Osiris's death and resurrection, like Persephone's, were thought to influence the growth of crops. Similarly, the ancient Romans had the myth of Proserpina, the Roman equivalent of Persephone, whose descent into the underworld also symbolized the death of the harvest. These shared motifs across cultures reflect the universal understanding that death and life are inextricably linked, just as the seasons change in an endless, cyclical pattern. But what makes Persephone's myth particularly fascinating is its connection to the human experience of transformation. While the seasons change predictably each year, our own lives are not as straightforward. We experience moments of growth, but also moments of loss and decay. Persephone's journey between worlds reflects these same cycles in human existence. Her descent into the underworld can be seen as symbolic of the struggles, losses, and challenges we all face in life. But her return to the earth represents renewal, personal growth, and the potential for new beginnings. The idea that Persephone's journey is a metaphor for personal transformation is echoed in the way modern psychology and self-help literature approach the concept of growth. In Jungian psychology, for example, the journey through darkness is often necessary for the development of the self. Persephone's descent is like the journey we all must take through our own inner shadows, confronting parts of ourselves that we may be uncomfortable with or unaware of. Only through this journey, through facing our fears, grief, or sorrow, can we achieve a deeper understanding of ourselves and emerge stronger, just as Persephone does when she rises from the underworld. Consider how this myth applies to the modern world. Much like Persephone, we all experience cycles of growth and decay in our personal lives. We have moments of success, times when everything feels fertile and full of promise, but we also face moments of difficulty, grief, or personal loss, when life feels barren or stagnant. It is in these moments of darkness that we often find the greatest opportunities for transformation. Just as Persephone's return brings new life to the earth, we too can experience personal renewal after times of hardship. This cycle of life and death, light and dark, is something that continues to resonate in modern times. We see it in the seasons, in our personal growth, and in the larger cycles of history. Just as Persephone's myth has been passed down through generations, it serves as a reminder that no matter how dark life may seem, there is always the possibility of rebirth. The earth itself, like us, goes through cycles of change, and from every winter of sorrow, spring always returns with the promise of new growth. Historians still argue whether the myth of Persephone was purely an explanation for the changing seasons, or whether it was a deeper, philosophical exploration of life and death. Some suggest that the myth was originally used to explain the death of crops during the winter months and their renewal in the spring, while others argue that it had a more profound spiritual significance. Whatever the case, Persephone's myth continues to serve as a reminder that death is not the end, but a necessary part of the cycle of life. Her journey, from the darkness of the underworld to the light of the earth, is a powerful symbol of renewal, growth, and the eternal cycle of transformation. Now that we've reflected on Persephone's profound role in the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, let's take a deeper look at how her myth influenced the concept of duality in Greek culture and beyond. Persephone embodies the balance between opposites, light and dark, life and death, joy and sorrow. The ancient Greeks saw the gods as reflections of these dualities, and Persephone's unique position between the living and the dead made her a central figure in understanding the nature of existence. Her story highlights how contrasting forces can coexist and how they shape the world we live in. Persephone's duality speaks to the ancient Greek understanding of fate and free will. While the gods were often seen as controlling human destiny, Persephone's myth offers a complex take on the tension between fate and personal choice. On one hand, Persephone is abducted by Hades and is bound to the underworld for part of each year, which suggests that some things in life are beyond our control. Yet, on the other hand, Persephone's role in both the underworld and the world above gives her power. She chooses to rule alongside Hades, and by eating the pomegranate seeds, she secures her place in both realms. Her actions in the underworld are not forced upon her, but rather, they reflect her ability to navigate and control her fate, even within the confines of a seemingly inevitable situation. This balance between control and submission is a theme that runs deep through many of the myths in Greek mythology. The gods, though powerful, are often shown to struggle with their own limitations. Even Zeus, the king of the gods, is bound by the laws of fate and the intricacies of human relationships. Persephone's myth, therefore, is not only about the changing seasons, but about the broader human experience of living in a world where we must constantly navigate the balance between forces beyond our control and the power we have to shape our own destinies. As we think about the nature of duality, it's worth considering how this theme appears in many aspects of ancient Greek life. In their worldview, the Greeks believed that balance and harmony were key to a healthy existence. This idea of balance was not just confined to the realm of mythology, it also permeated their philosophies, arts, and even political systems. The concept of duality is evident in the contrast between reason and emotion, life and death, civilization and nature. Much like how Persephone exists in both realms, The ancient Greeks understood that life required a balance between opposites in order to achieve harmony and growth. Persephone's myth also touches on the idea of transformation through suffering, a theme that was central to many Greek myths. The notion that suffering leads to change is exemplified in Persephone's journey. She is taken from her mother and forced into the underworld, where she experiences grief and loss. However, through this trial, she emerges as a powerful goddess with a deeper understanding of both life and death. Her time in the underworld transforms her, making her not only the queen of the dead, but also a figure of renewal and regeneration. This mirrors the Greek understanding of how hardship can lead to growth, and how challenges can ultimately shape us into stronger individuals. Persephone's transformation is also symbolic of the human condition. Just as she must experience the depths of sorrow before she can return to the world of light, we too often face personal trials that force us to grow and evolve. Her myth offers a sense of hope for those facing hardship, reminding us that even in our darkest moments, there is the potential for renewal and transformation. The spring that follows Persephone's return is a metaphor for the new life that comes after suffering, the blossoming of the earth after a long winter. This transformation through suffering and the cyclical nature of Persephone's story resonate with the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece, particularly the ideas of acceptance and resilience. Stoicism teaches that hardship is an inevitable part of life, and that true peace comes from accepting what we cannot change. Persephone's descent into the underworld is a powerful metaphor for this idea, showing that even the most difficult experiences can lead to personal growth. Her return to the earth, full of vitality and strength, serves as a reminder that suffering is not permanent, and that new life can spring from even the most challenging circumstances. In modern times, the myth of Persephone has continued to be a source of inspiration for those grappling with adversity. Her story is a timeless reminder that change is a natural part of life, and that even in our darkest moments, there is the possibility for transformation. Persephone's myth has become a symbol of hope for those who are navigating personal struggles, showing that there is always the potential for renewal, even after experiencing loss. Historians and modern scholars continue to explore the duality in Persephone's myth, debating its philosophical and psychological implications. Some view her descent as a metaphor for the necessary experience of facing one's own darkness, while others argue that her role as both the goddess of spring and the queen of the underworld symbolizes the balance required for both personal and collective harmony. Whatever the interpretation, it is clear that Persephone's myth is a powerful reflection of the dual nature of existence and the cyclical process of transformation that shapes both individuals and societies. As we continue to explore the depths of Persephone's myth, let's now focus on how her story has become a cornerstone of understanding the ancient Greek view of the soul's journey after death. In addition to her role in the natural world, governing the seasons, Persephone's time in the underworld also reflects the ancient Greek ideas surrounding the afterlife. The ancient Greeks believed in a shadowy, somewhat ambiguous afterlife, where the souls of the dead went to a place known as the underworld. This realm was ruled by Hades and his queen, Persephone, who presided over the souls of the deceased, guiding them through their final journey. The underworld, in Greek mythology, wasn't just a place of darkness and despair. It was a realm where the dead had to face the consequences of their actions in life. Persephone's role as queen of the underworld was integral to this concept. She wasn't just the passive consort of Hades. She was a figure of judgment, control, and transformation. Her presence in the underworld made her a symbol of the soul's final passage, a passage that, while inevitable, also held the promise of rebirth and renewal. Imagine the dead, entering the underworld, greeted not by a cold and unfeeling ruler, but by Persephone herself, a goddess who understood the balance between life and death. For the ancient Greeks, the idea of the soul's journey was never one of finality, but one of transition and transformation. Just as Persephone herself experienced a cycle of descent and return, so too did the souls of the dead journey through the underworld before being reborn in another form, whether through reincarnation, memory, or the continuation of their legacy on earth. But what about Persephone herself? How did she, a goddess who was once taken against her will, come to embody the role of queen of the dead? Her evolution from victim to ruler is one of the most powerful aspects of her myth. Persephone's initial abduction by Hades, while tragic, set in motion a process of personal transformation. She moves from being an innocent maiden, surrounded by the bounty of nature, to becoming a powerful ruler in the underworld, a queen who governs death with wisdom and strength. Her journey symbolizes the path of personal growth that comes from hardship, how trials and adversity, while difficult, can ultimately lead to a deeper understanding of oneself and one's place in the world. Her transformation reflects the broader human experience of suffering and recovery. The myth suggests that even when we are taken to our lowest point, our personal underworld, we have the potential to emerge stronger and more capable. Persephone's reign over the underworld, despite its associations with death, ultimately gives her a unique ability to shape the fate of souls and guide them toward renewal, just as she was once able to renew the earth with her return each spring. The ancient Greeks viewed Persephone as a goddess who controlled the cycle of life and death, a figure who could both bring life to the earth and govern the passage of souls into the afterlife. Her ability to navigate the boundaries between life and death, to control both realms, made her a powerful and mysterious figure. For the Greeks, death was not an end, but a transition, a passage that was part of a larger cycle of existence. Persephone's role as the queen of the underworld reflected this understanding of death as a necessary and natural part of the cosmic order. Historians and philosophers continue to debate the significance of Persephone's role in the afterlife. Some view her as a symbol of the soul's passage through death and rebirth, while others argue that she represents the connection between the living and the dead, between the mortal world and the divine. Whatever the interpretation, it's clear that Persephone's myth encapsulates the ancient Greek understanding of the soul's journey after death, not a final destination, but a transition, with the possibility of renewal and transformation. Persephone's reign in the underworld also speaks to the importance of ritual and ceremony in ancient Greek society. The Eleusinian mysteries, dedicated to Persephone and her mother Demeter, were centered around the themes of death, rebirth, and the afterlife. Initiates into these mysteries would have experienced a symbolic death and rebirth, echoing Persephone's journey between the worlds of the living and the dead. These rituals were designed to offer hope to the Greeks, hope that death was not the end, but a passage to a new phase of existence, one that was guided by the wisdom of the gods. The relationship between Persephone and the souls of the dead also highlights the ancient Greek belief in the importance of legacy. Just as Persephone's story was passed down through generations, so too were the deeds of the deceased carried on through the memory of their actions. Persephone, in her role as Queen of the Dead, ensures that the souls of the deceased are remembered and honored, reflecting the Greek value of maintaining a legacy after death. In this way, her myth reinforces the idea that death is not the end of a person's influence, but merely a transition to another form of existence, one that continues to shape the world even after the body is gone. As we contemplate Persephone's role in the underworld, we are reminded of the ancient Greek view of life and death, that these two realms are not opposites, but interconnected forces that work together to sustain the cycle of existence. Just as the earth must experience both seasons of growth and decay, so too must we experience both life and death, light and darkness, joy and sorrow. Persephone's myth teaches us that these cycles are not to be feared, but embraced, for they are the very essence of life itself. Now that we've delved into Persephone's role in the underworld and her connection to the cycles of life and death, let's explore her legacy in the broader context of ancient Greek philosophy and spirituality. Persephone's story has long been seen as more than just a myth. It is a deeply spiritual tale that speaks to the human condition, especially in relation to our understanding of the soul, death, and transformation. Her journey reflects the eternal struggle between opposing forces, light and dark, life and death, and how these forces must be balanced to maintain harmony in the world and within ourselves. In ancient Greek philosophy, the concept of duality played a significant role in how they understood the cosmos. The Greeks believed that the universe operated according to a series of opposites that, when balanced, created order and harmony. These dualities were seen in everything, day and night, hot and cold, life and death. Persephone's myth, in which she moves between the underworld and the earth, embodies this idea of balance. Her story teaches that life cannot exist without death, and death cannot exist without life. Just as the earth must undergo cycles of decay in order to give rise to new growth, so too must the soul undergo periods of darkness and struggle before it can be reborn. This idea of duality and transformation is central to many ancient Greek philosophies, particularly in the teachings of Pythagoras and Plato. Pythagoras, for instance, believed that the soul was immortal and that it underwent a series of reincarnations. In this process, the soul experienced both light and darkness, learning, and evolving through each life. Plato, too, explored the idea of the soul's journey in his works, particularly in the Phaedo, where he discusses the soul's ascent to higher realms after death. Persephone's journey, in which she is both the goddess of the earth's fertility and the queen of the underworld, aligns with these philosophical views, suggesting that the soul must pass through both life and death, each stage of the journey contributing to its ultimate growth and enlightenment. The symbolism of Persephone's descent and return also resonates with the Stoic philosophy of acceptance. The Stoics believed that life was filled with both suffering and joy, and the key to happiness was to accept both with equanimity. Persephone's story, with her time spent in the underworld and her return to the earth, mirrors the Stoic idea that we must accept the inevitable cycles of life, including death, and find peace in the process. Her myth teaches us that while we cannot control the forces of life and death, we can control how we respond to them. Persephone, as both a goddess of renewal and the queen of the dead, embodies this acceptance of life's inevitable cycles. In addition to the philosophical implications of her myth, Persephone's story also holds deep psychological significance. Her journey between the underworld and the earth has been interpreted through a Jungian lens as a metaphor for the process of individuation, the journey toward self-awareness and psychological wholeness. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist, believed that in order to become whole, a person must confront the shadow, the hidden or repressed aspects of the self. Persephone's descent into the underworld symbolizes this confrontation with the shadow, with the unconscious mind. It is only through this journey, through facing the darkness, that Persephone, and by extension each of us, can return to the light, transformed and empowered. This concept of psychological transformation through darkness is something that resonates deeply in the modern world. In our own lives, we often go through periods of difficulty or emotional pain, times when we feel like we're in our own personal underworld. Yet, just as Persephone's time in the underworld is not permanent, neither are our struggles. Through self-reflection, acceptance, and the courage to face our own inner darkness, we too can emerge transformed and renewed. Persephone's myth reminds us that these dark periods are not something to be feared, but an essential part of the process of growth and self-discovery. In addition to its philosophical and psychological implications, Persephone's myth has also influenced the way we view death and the afterlife. For the ancient Greeks, death was not an end, but a transition, just as Persephone's descent into the underworld was not the end of her story, but a necessary part of her journey. This view of death as a transition, rather than a finality, is central to many of the world's religious and spiritual traditions. It reflects the belief that death is not something to be feared, but a passage to another form of existence, where the soul continues its journey and transformation. This concept of the afterlife, where the soul continues its journey, is echoed in many religious traditions that followed ancient Greece. In Christianity, for example, the idea of resurrection and eternal life is central to the faith, as believers are promised that they too will experience a form of rebirth after death. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the idea of reincarnation offers a similar perspective, where the soul is reborn in a new form, continuing its spiritual journey across lifetimes. Persephone's myth, with its themes of death, rebirth, and renewal, resonates deeply with these universal beliefs about the soul's journey and its eternal connection to life. Persephone's legacy, therefore, extends far beyond her myth in Greek culture. Her story speaks to universal themes of transformation, growth, and the cycles of life and death that shape all of existence. Her duality, as both a goddess of life and a queen of the dead, serves as a powerful symbol of the balance required to navigate the complexities of the human experience. Her myth, as timeless as the changing seasons, continues to inspire and teach us that life and death are not separate, but part of a greater whole, each one leading to the other in an endless, transformative cycle. Now that we've reflected on Persephone's timeless significance across cultures and philosophies, let's turn our attention to how her myth has continued to evolve in modern interpretations and adaptations. While the ancient Greeks viewed Persephone as a powerful figure of transformation, rebirth, and balance, her story has remained deeply relevant throughout history, inspiring countless generations. In modern culture, Persephone's myth has been reimagined in literature, art, film, and even pop culture, each time reflecting the prevailing concerns and values of the time. In contemporary literature, Persephone's myth often finds new life in novels and poetry, where her story is retold through a modern lens. One of the most prominent ways in which Persephone has been reinterpreted is as a symbol of empowerment. In these retellings, Persephone is no longer the passive figure of the myth who is taken by Hades against her will. Instead, she is often portrayed as an active participant in her fate, choosing to embrace her dual role as both the goddess of life and the queen of the underworld. This modern version of Persephone highlights her strength, wisdom, and autonomy, transforming her from a passive victim into a powerful figure who can navigate both light and dark on her own terms. One notable example of Persephone's modern reinvention is in the world of fantasy literature. In many novels, Persephone is reimagined as a character who is torn between two worlds: the vibrant, chaotic life above and the somber, controlled world of the underworld. In these stories, her journey is often depicted as a battle for agency. She must reconcile her need for freedom with the responsibilities of her role in the underworld. These modern interpretations of Persephone's myth resonate with contemporary themes of identity, autonomy, and the struggle to find balance in a world full of competing demands. Film and television adaptations also explore Persephone's myth, often taking creative liberties to give her a more active role. In some modern retellings, Persephone's descent into the underworld is portrayed as an intentional choice, one she makes to explore her own power and to understand the darkness within herself. These adaptations focus on Persephone's internal growth and the way her experiences in the underworld shape her into a more complex and multidimensional figure. In pop culture, Persephone's story has even been incorporated into video games and graphic novels, where she is often cast as a heroine or anti-heroine who must navigate the tensions between her earthly and underworldly identities. These modern renditions focus on her strength, wisdom, and resilience, transforming her into a character who can control her destiny, even in the face of powerful forces. Her duality becomes a central theme in many of these stories, reflecting the modern fascination with characters who live between worlds and balance competing forces within themselves. Her story also resonates strongly in feminist interpretations, where Persephone is viewed as a symbol of women's agency and power. In these versions, Persephone's myth is not just about her abduction, but about her eventual mastery of her circumstances. Her time in the underworld becomes a period of self-discovery and empowerment, and her return to the earth is seen as a moment of reclamation. Feminist retellings emphasize Persephone's ability to take control of her own life, making her a symbol of resilience and autonomy for women everywhere. But what makes these modern adaptations so powerful is not just the ways in which Persephone is reinterpreted, but the timeless themes her story addresses. Her journey between the underworld and the earth is about more than just seasonal change. It's about the broader cycles of life and death, light and darkness, and creation and destruction. Persephone's myth continues to resonate because it touches on universal truths about the human experience, about the darkness we all face, the pain we endure, and the renewal we can find through resilience and transformation. It's interesting to consider how these modern interpretations of Persephone might differ from the ancient Greek version of her story. In the ancient world, Persephone's myth was largely an explanation of the changing seasons and an attempt to make sense of the agricultural cycles that governed life. Today, however, Persephone's myth has evolved into something far more complex and multifaceted. Her journey now represents the human experience in a broader sense: our struggles, our personal growth, and our ability to overcome challenges and transform ourselves. Historians and mythologists still debate the deeper meanings of Persephone's myth. Some argue that the myth was always intended as a reflection of the cycles of nature, while others suggest that it was a story about personal transformation and the integration of opposites within the human psyche. Whatever the interpretation, one thing is certain: Persephone's myth remains relevant because it speaks to the fundamental aspects of life that we all experience. Her story is not just a tale of gods and goddesses, it's a reflection of the forces that shape all of us, and it continues to inspire new generations of people to find balance, resilience, and empowerment in their own lives. Persephone's myth will continue to evolve as long as we find value in its timeless themes. Whether in literature, art, or culture, her story has the power to speak to our deepest fears and desires, offering a reminder that life and death, light and dark, are inextricably linked, and that we can find strength in both. Her journey from the underworld to the earth and back again shows us that transformation is not only possible but necessary, and that through every hardship, there is the potential for renewal. As we continue to explore the evolving nature of Persephone's myth, it's important to consider her symbolic impact in the context of the natural world. While Persephone's story is often framed as a reflection of life, death, and rebirth, it also speaks to the deeper interconnectedness between humans and nature. The ancient Greeks didn't just see Persephone's role in the changing seasons as a poetic explanation. They understood it as a vital force that governed life itself. Her myth was a direct reflection of the Earth's cycles, and her return each spring symbolized the triumph of nature's resilience after periods of dormancy. The connection between Persephone and the Earth is one of the central motifs of her myth. She is not only the goddess of the spring, but also the goddess who presides over the Earth's fertility and abundance. When she is in the underworld, the Earth's crops wither and die as Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, grieves for her lost daughter. But when Persephone returns, the Earth bursts into life once again, as if her very presence causes the Earth to exhale and release the vitality that had been locked away during the dark months of winter. This cyclical pattern of life and death, of seasonal renewal, is something that transcends the mythological world and speaks directly to the human condition. Just as Persephone's return signifies the resurrection of the Earth's bounty, it also symbolizes the way in which we, too, experience cycles of growth, stagnation, and rebirth. The human experience is often marked by periods of struggle and loss, but just as the Earth renews itself each year, we too have the capacity to transform and emerge stronger from adversity. The agricultural and natural symbolism in Persephone's myth has not been lost on modern environmental thinkers and ecologists. In a world facing climate change and environmental degradation, Persephone's myth offers a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between humans and the natural world. Her story underscores the importance of respecting the Earth's cycles and understanding that our relationship with the environment is one of interdependence. Just as the Earth requires balance between life and death, so too do we need to live in harmony with the natural world in order to ensure the sustainability of our planet. Many environmentalists today draw parallels between Persephone's myth and the current environmental crises we face. The seasons of death and rebirth in the myth reflect the ecological processes that sustain life on Earth. But as our relationship with the environment becomes increasingly strained, we are reminded of the consequences of imbalance. Just as the Earth withered during Persephone's absence, the planet, too, is suffering from the negative effects of human activity. In this sense, Persephone's return each spring symbolizes the potential for healing and renewal, but it also calls for awareness and action to ensure the Earth's resilience. Persephone's myth has also influenced contemporary feminist thought, particularly in how women navigate their roles in society. Her dual existence as both the queen of the underworld and the goddess of spring offers a nuanced understanding of femininity and power. In a patriarchal society, Persephone's story has often been interpreted as one of victimhood. She is taken from her mother and forced into marriage with Hades. But in modern feminist interpretations, her myth is viewed as one of empowerment. Persephone's descent into the underworld, once seen as a symbol of her abduction, is now seen as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. By embracing her role as the queen of the underworld, Persephone transforms from a passive figure into an active force of change. This modern reimagining of Persephone speaks to the complexities of femininity and empowerment. Just as Persephone rules over both the fertile earth and the dark underworld, women too navigate multiple roles and identities. They are expected to embody both nurturing, life-giving qualities, as well as strength and resilience in the face of adversity. Persephone's myth serves as a reminder that true power comes from embracing both aspects of oneself, from reconciling the light and dark within us, and using those forces to create change. Philosophers and mythologists continue to debate the significance of Persephone's duality. Some argue that her descent into the underworld represents the suppression of the feminine, while others view it as a journey of empowerment, where Persephone's return to the earth signifies her reclaiming of her power. Whatever the interpretation, it's clear that Persephone's myth resonates deeply in today's world, where the exploration of identity, power, and transformation remains ever relevant. As we continue to explore Persephone's influence on our modern world, we begin to see her as a powerful symbol of renewal, both in the natural world and in the human soul. Her journey between two worlds, life and death, the surface and the underworld, offers us a timeless narrative of resilience, transformation, and the interconnectedness of all things. In our personal lives, in our relationship with the earth, and in our exploration of gender and power, Persephone's myth remains a source of wisdom and inspiration. As we continue to explore the layers of Persephone's myth, let's now focus on her relationship with Demeter, her mother, and the profound emotional connection between them. While Persephone's journey is central to the myth, it is the relationship between mother and daughter that adds an emotional depth to the story. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest and agriculture, is a figure of nurturing, care, and sustenance. Her love for Persephone runs deep, and her grief when Persephone is taken to the underworld is one of the most poignant moments in Greek mythology. The loss of Persephone to Hades represents a personal, emotional crisis for Demeter. In her sorrow, she withdraws from her divine duties, causing the earth to fall barren and lifeless. The crops wither, and famine spreads across the world. This reaction speaks not only to the power of a mother's love, but also to the interconnectedness of life. Demeter's despair symbolizes the way in which emotional loss can affect not just the individual, but the world around them. Her withdrawal from her responsibilities highlights the deep pain of separation, and how the bond between mother and child can shape the course of nature itself. Imagine the depth of Demeter's sorrow, a grief so great that it causes the earth itself to wither. It's a raw, visceral representation of what happens when we lose something dear to us. The myth shows us that love is not just an abstract concept. It is a force that shapes the very world we live in. The earth responds to Demeter's emotional turmoil, mirroring the effects of grief in the human experience. Just as we feel the weight of loss in our bodies and hearts, so too does the earth feel the absence of Persephone. The myth underscores the idea that love and loss are both powerful forces, ones that resonate deeply not just in the individual, but in the larger world around them. But the myth of Persephone is also one of reconciliation and hope. After much negotiation between the gods, Persephone is allowed to return to her mother, bringing with her the promise of fertility and abundance. The reunion between Demeter and Persephone symbolizes the restoration of balance, both emotionally and spiritually. Demeter's joy at seeing her daughter again is mirrored by the earth's rebirth, as the crops flourish and the earth is restored to life. This moment of reunion is a powerful symbol of healing, of the restoration of the natural order, and of the enduring power of love and connection. The bond between Demeter and Persephone also represents the cyclical nature of life. While their separation is painful, it is an inevitable part of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Persephone must descend into the underworld, just as winter must come after autumn, but her return brings new growth and renewal, just as spring follows winter. This cyclical process is an essential part of both the natural world and the human experience. We all experience moments of separation, loss, and grief, but we also experience moments of reunion, healing, and renewal. The story of Demeter and Persephone reminds us that life is made up of these cycles, of dark and light, of endings and beginnings, and that each cycle is necessary for the growth and transformation of both the individual and the world. As we consider the emotional depth of Demeter's love for Persephone, it's important to recognize the larger societal context of their myth. In ancient Greece, the relationship between mother and daughter was foundational to social and familial structures. The maternal bond was seen as the primary source of care, nourishment, and continuity. Persephone's story, with its themes of separation and reunion, speaks to the ways in which the family unit is essential to both individual well-being and the broader societal health. The mother-daughter relationship is not just about personal attachment, but about the continuation of life itself. Without the nurturing bond of the mother, life would be impossible. Demeter's emotional turmoil in the absence of Persephone also highlights the role of women in ancient Greek society. Women were often seen as the caretakers of the home, the providers of sustenance, and the bearers of life. Demeter's grief and her subsequent restoration of fertility reflect the central role that women played in maintaining the health and prosperity of society. The myth suggests that women, like Demeter, have the power to influence the world around them, both through their emotional connection to others and through their ability to bring life into being. Persephone, as both a goddess and a symbol of the earth's fertility, embodies this power as well, showing that women are deeply connected to the natural cycles of the world. In modern interpretations of Persephone's myth, the relationship between mother and daughter has often been used as a lens through which to explore themes of attachment, separation, and independence. Feminist scholars, in particular, have looked at the myth as a reflection of women's complex relationships with their mothers and with society. In these interpretations, Persephone's descent into the underworld is seen as a necessary rite of passage, a journey toward individuation and self-actualization. Her return to Demeter, then, represents a reconciliation of the self with the collective, a coming back into harmony with the world after the struggle for independence. Historians and psychologists continue to debate the symbolic meanings of the relationship between Demeter and Persephone. Some see it as a reflection of the universal maternal bond, while others view it as a metaphor for the psychological process of growth and self-discovery. Regardless of the interpretation, the mother-daughter relationship in Persephone's myth continues to resonate deeply. It reminds us that love, loss, and reunion are fundamental to the human experience, and that the cycles of life are as much emotional and spiritual as they are physical. As we delve into the complex relationship between Demeter and Persephone, it's important to consider the broader societal and cultural implications of their story. The myth of Persephone is not only a reflection of the personal bond between mother and daughter, but also a profound commentary on the ancient Greek worldview, especially in relation to the concepts of life, death, and the power of the feminine. This myth shaped the spiritual and agricultural practices of the ancient Greeks, and in many ways, laid the foundation for understanding how humans relate to the natural world. In ancient Greek culture, the seasonal changes marked by Persephone's descent and return were not just symbolic, they were integral to the rhythm of agricultural life. Persephone, as the goddess of spring and renewal, was closely linked to the cycles of planting, growth, and harvest. Her descent into the underworld mirrored the fallow period of winter, while her return signified the arrival of spring and the rebirth of life on earth. This cyclical understanding of time was deeply embedded in the agricultural practices of ancient Greece. Farmers and villagers relied on the patterns of the seasons to determine when to plant and harvest crops, and they looked to the gods, especially Demeter and Persephone, to ensure the fertility of the land. In the context of Greek religion, the Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most important religious rites in ancient Greece, were dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. These mysteries, held annually, celebrated the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, symbolized by Persephone's descent and return. The initiates of these mysteries underwent rituals that were believed to bring them closer to the gods and to offer them a form of spiritual enlightenment. The connection between Demeter, Persephone, and the agricultural cycle was not just a mythological concept. It was a core part of the spiritual life of the ancient Greeks, particularly in their understanding of life's impermanence and the possibility of renewal. As we explore the myth's enduring legacy, we see how Persephone's story has transcended its original agricultural and religious context to become a symbol of transformation, resilience, and empowerment. In modern times, Persephone's journey has been reimagined as a metaphor for personal growth and the human experience of navigating loss, grief, and renewal. Persephone's time in the underworld has been interpreted as a symbolic descent into the depths of the self, where one must confront the darkness before emerging into the light of self-discovery and personal strength. This interpretation speaks to the universal human experience of facing hardship and finding strength in adversity. This psychological interpretation of Persephone's myth resonates with the contemporary understanding of trauma and healing. Persephone's journey through the underworld is a reflection of the psychological process of confronting and integrating one's shadow, the repressed, unconscious aspects of the self. Jungian psychology, in particular, emphasizes the importance of this process in achieving individuation, or the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. Persephone's descent into the underworld and her return to the earth symbolize this journey toward wholeness and self-realization. Her myth, therefore, offers a powerful narrative for those seeking to understand their own psychological transformation and the process of healing from past wounds. In addition to her role as a symbol of personal transformation, Persephone's myth also speaks to the broader cultural shifts that have taken place over time. As we look at modern feminist readings of Persephone's story, we see how her myth has been reinterpreted as a symbol of female agency and empowerment. In the ancient myth, Persephone's abduction by Hades is often seen as an act of victimization. But in contemporary feminist interpretations, Persephone's time in the underworld is framed as a period of self-discovery and empowerment. Her eventual return to the earth symbolizes the reclamation of her power, as she becomes a queen in her own right, ruling over both the living and the dead. This feminist reading of Persephone's story reflects the larger cultural movement toward recognizing and celebrating women's power and autonomy. Just as Persephone takes control of her fate, modern women are increasingly asserting their right to navigate the complexities of their own lives and make their own choices. Persephone's journey from victimhood to empowerment mirrors the journeys of countless women throughout history who have had to confront societal constraints and reclaim their power. Persephone's myth, in this context, becomes a symbol of resilience, strength, and the capacity to transform even in the face of adversity. As we reflect on Persephone's journey through the underworld, we also see how her story speaks to the cyclical nature of existence itself. Her descent and return reflect the eternal rhythms of life, death, and rebirth that govern both the natural world and human experience. Persephone's myth reminds us that change is inevitable, but it also offers us hope, that through every trial, every loss, and every dark moment, there is always the potential for renewal and growth. Just as the earth experiences cycles of death and rebirth, so too do we, finding strength and renewal in the face of life's inevitable challenges. In both ancient and modern contexts, Persephone's myth serves as a reminder that we are not defined by our hardships, but by how we navigate them. Persephone teaches us that transformation is not a passive process. It requires agency, resilience, and a willingness to face the darkness in order to emerge into the light. Her story, much like the cycles of the seasons, is one of constant renewal, a testament to the power of resilience, growth, and the ever-present potential for transformation. As we reach the final section of our journey through Persephone's myth, let's reflect on the enduring power and relevance of her story in the modern world. While Persephone's tale originated in ancient Greece, her myth transcends time and place, speaking to universal themes that continue to resonate deeply across cultures and generations. From her transformation from victim to queen, to her role as a symbol of life, death, and rebirth, Persephone's myth offers a timeless meditation on the cycles of life that all of us must navigate. In our modern world, Persephone's story continues to inspire and inform. The challenges and transformations she faces in the underworld mirror the personal struggles that many people experience today. Whether it's overcoming grief, facing adversity, or confronting personal limitations, Persephone's descent and return symbolize the journey toward healing and self-realization. Just as she emerges from the darkness of the underworld to bring life back to the earth, we too have the potential to rise from our own dark periods and create new beginnings. Her myth offers a blueprint for how we can confront our shadows, heal, and emerge stronger, just as she does after her time in the underworld. In a broader sense, Persephone's myth speaks to the cycles of transformation that exist within every aspect of life. It is not just about personal growth, but also the larger cycles of nature, society, and history. Just as the earth experiences cycles of death and rebirth with the changing seasons, so too do we experience moments of crisis and renewal throughout our lives. Persephone's myth serves as a reminder that these cycles are natural and necessary. They are an essential part of life's rhythms. Whether we are navigating personal loss, career changes, or moments of spiritual growth, Persephone's journey reminds us that transformation often comes after hardship, and that every ending is an opportunity for a new beginning. In the realm of environmentalism, Persephone's myth has found new relevance as a symbol of the natural world's cycles. Her return to the earth, bringing with it fertility and abundance, echoes the earth's ability to regenerate and renew itself, even after periods of decay. As we face environmental challenges in our modern world, from climate change to the loss of biodiversity, Persephone's myth reminds us that nature is resilient, and that the earth's cycles of growth and renewal are both inevitable and restorative. Her story encourages us to respect and protect the natural world, understanding that just as the earth has the ability to regenerate, so too can humanity find ways to heal and restore our planet. Moreover, Persephone's reign as the queen of the underworld also speaks to the power of embracing both life and death in their fullness. Her role as the ruler of both the living and the dead demonstrates that life cannot be fully understood without its counterpart, death. This duality is something that we, as individuals and as a society, must come to terms with. In our modern, often death-averse world, Persephone's story challenges us to face the reality of death and its inevitable place in the cycles of life. Rather than fearing or avoiding death, we are encouraged to recognize it as part of the larger process of transformation and growth. In psychology, Persephone's journey has been interpreted as a metaphor for the human psyche's ability to integrate opposites. In Jungian terms, Persephone represents the process of individuation, the integration of the conscious and unconscious, light and dark, masculine and feminine. Her descent into the underworld symbolizes the unconscious, the parts of ourselves that are hidden or suppressed, while her return represents the conscious integration of these aspects. By confronting her inner darkness and emerging stronger, Persephone serves as a powerful archetype for those seeking to understand their own personal transformation and integration. In modern feminist interpretations, Persephone's story is often framed as one of empowerment. Once a figure who is abducted and forced into a passive role, she becomes a powerful queen who rules over both life and death. This transformation mirrors the journey of many women throughout history, who have had to navigate and overcome patriarchal systems that limit their agency. Persephone's myth, in this sense, has become a symbol of female strength, resilience, and empowerment. Her story is one of reclaiming power, agency, and autonomy, reflecting the ongoing struggle for gender equality and the recognition of women's rights. In art and literature, Persephone's myth continues to inspire creative reinterpretations. Her duality, both the goddess of spring and the queen of the dead, offers rich material for exploration, whether through paintings, poetry, or modern storytelling. Artists have long been fascinated by Persephone's dual nature, often portraying her as both the youthful, innocent goddess and the regal, commanding queen. These depictions reflect the complexities of her character and the many layers of meaning in her myth. Whether in classical sculptures, Renaissance paintings, or contemporary art, Persephone's image continues to evolve, yet her essence remains the same, a symbol of transformation, resilience, and the balance between opposing forces. As we close our journey through Persephone's myth, we find that her story continues to offer valuable lessons for modern life. She is a figure of transformation, teaching us that change is an inevitable part of existence, and that even in our darkest moments, there is always the potential for renewal. Her myth speaks to the power of embracing both life and death, light and dark, and finding balance in the cycles of nature and the human experience. Persephone's journey from the underworld to the earth, from loss to renewal, is a timeless reminder that we, too, can navigate the challenges of life and emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient. So, as you reflect on Persephone's enduring legacy, remember that her myth is not just a tale of gods and goddesses. It is a story of the human journey, of struggle, growth, and transformation. Just as Persephone's return to the earth marks the arrival of spring, so too can we find our own moments of rebirth and renewal, no matter how dark or difficult the journey may seem. Persephone's story is a powerful reminder that from death comes new life, and from every struggle comes the opportunity for growth and change.